Nothing is free anymore, not even your peace of mind. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm actually referring to the Headspace app. So if you are not familiar with the Headspace app, it's a meditation app that you can do meditations, do live meditations. It's pretty holistic. I'll actually link to it in the show notes. And I don't know if you know the app Calm, but though if you know Calm, it's an app like Calm, right? So you could actually go check it out on your phone. If you are Android, you could search it and see what it's all about. But I also link to the Headspace app in the description so you could learn more about what it is. Now, Headspace is an app that I have used in a paid format as well as a free format for quite a few years since I first learned about it. I think I learned about it back in 2018 when I was part of a 5 a.m. mastermind group, and I just fell in love with it ever since. It was really helped me to be able to focus on like holding the meditation even when the mind wanders, etc., etc. All right, but let me bring it back. Peace of mind, not even peace of mind is free anymore. And I say that to really bring forward the topic of the fact that many of our favorite apps for business and productivity and many apps that we use in our day-to-day lives, especially the productivity apps, whether we use these productivity apps in our personal lives or our business lives or careers, at work, the job, the free tiers are slowly either being, I don't know if the word is downgraded, but it's just getting a lot more limiting, or if they even offer it anymore at all. So instead of having the free option where you could listen to these like 5 meditations only, which really only takes you so far in the experience like any other product, now even that is gone, right? And now, like most things, there's a free trial. There's I think it's 14 days, and people, apps or companies that once had 14-day trials now have 7-day trials, and everything is just being cut back in order to push you forward to the paid experience, right? And before you hold your head and go like, oh my gosh, another thing that I have to pay for, we'll actually dive into being lean when it comes to the apps and the systems, not really systems, because systems is the process. The apps and the softwares are just the tools, but that's another conversation for another day. What I really wanted to dive into are the lessons, because instead of getting upset, that's like wasting time. What we can do is stop and take a moment and look around at the fact that things are changing, things have changed, and things are continuing to change, and it's going to continue to change even more as we continue further and further. I don't even say out of the pandemic, because I'm not even really sure what's going on with that. I don't think anybody knows, but the more we experience life after 2020, things are going to keep changing, and we just have to learn how to adapt. So how do we adapt, right? So the lessons that I wanted to observe from big companies like Headspace, we as small business owners need to like pay attention, right? There's so, like, for example, we are webinared out. Webinars are a strategy to get people to buy what you have to offer. It really is a demo session, right? If you haven't peeped that already. And not just a demo session, but it's an opportunity to build community, etc., etc. However, people are webinared out. As much as we might be like introverts or people who love staying home and we love the virtual world, some of you listening may not. You probably miss and crave in-person interaction. Whichever side of the fence you are on, a lot of people are webinared out, including myself. It's just become so overwhelming. So that, as an example, is the fact that strategies are changing. A lot of the strategies that we were taught and that we learned in 2020 and most of 2021 no longer apply. These were the strategies that you might have now gotten introduced to that were really based off of a pre-pandemic world. So now we need to adapt and learn what is the new strategies. What do I need to tweak in my current strategy? What do I need to tweak in my current business and the way how I connect with my audience today to adapt to where people are today, right? Because everything is changing. People, the way they buy, it's changing. There are, for the most part, like, some things don't change, but in terms of the specific tools that we use and the structures, we gotta pay attention to the trends. So I took a step back. Last week, I had to upgrade to something. Then I got this email from Headspace, and then also another app that I love, something went away and I had to pay for it. And it's like, okay, what is the lesson here? So let's dive into it. All right. So first of all, yesterday morning, I woke up and I checked my emails. I checked my emails, responded to emails, sent out some emails that were due to be sent. And the first lesson, of course, is that the free experience is gone, right? I woke up to find that the Headspace free experience is going away and to be replaced by a 14-day free trial. Right? Now let's tie this back to us as small business owners, service providers, and even product-based businesses, right? Discovery calls. Many service-based businesses use discovery calls as part of their way to vet new clients, get people to have an idea of what it is like to work with you, right? Which is super important, especially if you are a service-based business and you provide a service. Like, people need to know who they're working with. So the discovery call is awesome, right? The discovery call is equivalent to that free trial, or it's equivalent to that free tier that an app would give to you, right? So if big companies are removing that, then we now as small business owners might actually have to start thinking about, do we want to start charging a small fee for discovery calls? And this isn't a new concept, right? If you are tired and burnt out by getting on 1 million discovery calls and then your conversion ratio sucks, or it might not just be that it sucks, but you're not getting the return on investment that is really actually helping you push the needle forward, right? Without getting into any specific numbers, you will know what that means and looks like for you. We also have to remember that we are small businesses. Many of us are one-person shows with an assistant or a very small team, which means that your resources in terms of time is limited. So if big companies can be taking away their free experience that really doesn't cost them time, it might cost them somewhere else. Who are we? So my first lesson is, do you want to consider having a small fee? Now, I do have that in my process, and how to put it? There are some cases where I use it, and then there are some cases that I don't, depending on what the application is. So I have different funnels, right? So what happens is, depending on the service that is being inquired for, there is definitely a paid fee. And what happens is that if you do decide to work together, then that fee gets deducted from the cost of the service that you move forward with. So technically it's free, but if you don't move forward, then, well, That's that, right? And this is a way to also weed out people who are really serious. Now, if you decide to keep your discovery calls free, here's another thing you need to understand. Strategically, discovery calls aren't really an opportunity to solve people's problem. It's not to give away your ideas, because let's be real now. Let's address the elephant in the room. People take these ideas and take it to their friends, or they take it to someone else. Like, your brain is your asset. So the point of a discovery call is really to let people get to know you, to understand if the fit is there, if it's a right fit, if the vibe is there, if they jive with you, for lack of a better term at the moment. Like, you get what I mean? Like, when you are offering a service, it's different to when it's a product. And you need to actually like the individual who you will be front facing with majority of the time. So this is why discovery calls are important, but if they're free, you need to approach them strategically. They're just an opportunity for people to meet you, to understand the solution that you offer, and to help you guide them as if, okay, moving forward with me is actually going to solve your problem. This is what we're going to do. This is a good fit. Or it's an opportunity, if you're a service provider with integrity, which I hope you are, you would also let them know, like, listen, I'm sorry, but I don't think this is the right fit. Maybe you don't like them to have them as a client, or maybe you just honestly don't think you're the right solution for them, and they spending their money with you will not be the best use of their funds. And now this is your opportunity to build relationship, because that integrity will always shine through. Later on, they might refer you to someone else. They may come back to you later on because you've built that relationship through integrity and honesty. So you can let them know who else that they can work with, what service is better suited for them, or you might be the perfect service provider and you just let them know what services they need to solve the problem, the cost. You talk about those things. You talk about the how to work with you, not what the actual solution is. That's how you strategically use discovery calls, right? But that's another discussion for another day as well. But I just want to let you know that if you're going to keep using free discovery calls, there's a way to do it. And I can walk you through that process and how you can maintain a very productive call without giving away all of your secrets of your trade. So definitely click the link in the description to find out how we can hop on a call to discuss those things. All right. Now, the next thing that I absolutely loved is how they structured it, right? So they removed their free tier, but they still have free options through their content, right? They recently launched a podcast. So instead of using the app in a free way and getting free meditations, they have a podcast now. So, for example, you might listen to their podcast to still help yourself get grounded. It might not be meditations, but it's very nourishing content. And then they also have partnered with other podcasts that they are sponsored. That they sponsored. So I want you to actually ask yourself, what would that look like for you? What would it look like for you if you removed whatever free experience that you had? Maybe it's a discovery call, maybe it's something else that you offer. And how can you restructure it where people can still connect with you without having to give away a taste of the product or the service, right? Now, it's a little bit trickier for service-based businesses. This might more apply to product-based businesses, but I just want to put that journal prompt out there. Like, grab your notebook, your business journal, your brand journal, or if you have my basic to branded workbook, go to the back pages where there's lots of space for writing and write down the question. What would that look like for me if I removed the free tier option, but how would I show up and give value in other ways? I can give you some tips and ideas, but we don't have enough time in this podcast to go through all of that. So definitely click the link in the description or the show notes and we can do a one-on-one session. All right. So they took away the free tier and introduced a podcast. They have sponsored podcasts and they have the sponsored podcast. Oh, and they actually have their blog. It's called Articles, and I believe they have the YouTube. They had a link to YouTube, but I didn't get to take a look at it. But I'm pretty sure that the YouTube is basically repurposed content of the podcast just on YouTube. All right, now the other part to this lesson in terms of how they restructured it is how they even communicated this new change. And I want to call this how they communicated the breakup. Oftentimes as service providers, especially like if you're a graphic designer, videographer, social media manager, like the point is you're a creative entrepreneur, you're a creative service provider, and you have these clients who have been with you for a long time and you are unsure how to communicate either a change in pricing, which usually means an increase, or you need to break up with them for some reason, whatever it is, right? It's probably not working out. So what I also took notes of is how they communicated that breakup, right? So here's the first thing that I noticed. The email that they sent out, look at the subject line. The subject line said, "Your headspace experience is changing soon." So when that popped up in my inbox, I was like, I mean, I kind of knew where that was going. And I think as human beings, we know what this means. But it was just a warm way to start, which makes you skim over the other emails in your inbox and it gets the email opened, right? So bigger than emails, when you want to get someone's attention, generally speaking, you want to start off in a warm and inviting way because this isn't great news, like something's going away, your free experience is going away. Now pay attention to the terminology, your headspace, right? It personalizes it it's general, they're not using your name, but it feels personal, like your headspace, right? That is psychology when it comes to copywriting. So I wanted you to take a note of that. Experience. So they didn't say the plan is going away or services. They didn't use services. They use experience because it's an experience. And they said it is changing soon, right? So another way to ease the blow when you have to, I guess, exert some sort of boundaries, words like changing, again, also asserts yourself but softens the blow, and it also lets you know soon. So it's like, hey, you want to open this email because something is happening soon, right? So it also gives you a sense of urgency. One simple line was written so craftily, okay? Your headspace experience is changing soon. So I love how they opened the email. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire email. I just made a few notes. I liked how they closed off the email. So they communicated the changes, the free trial, this is going away, etc., etc. And in closing, again, this showed empathy in the way that they communicated. These are also brand lessons, right? Because now it's also consistent with their brand voice. They're showing empathy. This is an app that helps you to meditate, right? So keep that in mind. But you might not be a self-care product or service. If you are, this is a great company to follow brands and pay attention to the way they do their marketing that's within your niche. And it may not be your niche specifically, but in a broader sense. So this is health, self-care, that type of stuff, right? Now, on to the closing statement. So they showed empathy. And whether you're in whether you are in the self-care space or not, all businesses can benefit from applying empathy in the way that they speak. So one of the closing statements was the last line actually. If a paid subscription just isn't right for you right now, right? Here are a few other places you can join our community. Oftentimes when we're speaking with prospective clients, when we follow up or we hang up on the discovery call, it's kind of like bye deuces, right? I mean, at least not for me, but sometimes we're not mindful or we say, okay, no problem. Like, better than saying, okay, no problem, we can still assert next steps, even if the person says not right now. Notice I said not no, but they said not right now, right? Even if they said no, most of the times can mean not right now. So even when people might not have converted today, you can let them know, hey, well, let's still connect on Instagram or, join my email list so that you can continue to get resources. Like, close off with inviting them with your free resources. If you don't have some free resources, well, now is the time to work on that. So your free resources is your helpful, value-added content, your blog, your podcast, your email list, your YouTube, right? This is why it's so important to nurture those areas, because it makes standing your boundaries a lot easier, because you've nurtured the free options. So that now is like, hey, knock yourself out with those free options, because if that's not enough, then it's probably time to think about the paid experience. So I want to repeat this again. Maybe you can write it down. If a paid subscription just isn't right for you right now, make a note of the language. It just isn't right for you right now. Like, I love that, right? So if you write this down, you're going to take this and kind of use it as a structure to write your own version of this for your business and your products and services, right? So they go on to say, if a paid subscription just isn't for you right now, here are a few other places where you can join our community. All right, so they call it community. Now, you don't have to call it community. You could say places, right? But they use community, which is a nice ring to it, which then linked to their YouTube, their podcast, and their sponsored podcasts, and their blog, right? So the link actually had like the YouTube link, it had the Instagram, then it had the podcast link, and then it had articles, which when you click on it, it's essentially aka blog, right? And another lesson that you could take from that is, don't think that you're too big or you're too good enough because you don't have enough time. Like, I have my day job, I have this, I don't have time to blog. Well, if big companies see the importance in having a blog or having a podcast, ask yourself, who am I to not? Who am I to not? All right. If you don't have a podcast, but you are featured in many different places, you can actually just have your blog be about, well, not just, but when you don't have time, you've spent time being featured on other people's platform, grab the embed code from those lives, Instagrams, actually download it, because if it was to come off of Facebook or Instagram, download those videos and put it on your website as a blog post, and write a short paragraph, which will be great for your SEO, and allow that to guest feature, whether it was a live on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, podcast. get as much traction out of it as possible. Okay? Right. So, and I also want to bring notice to the fact that the big three are there, right? The big three are blog, podcast, YouTube. Why? Because all three of these rank are like the big three when it comes to SEO, optimization, and being found in Google. And the Headspace company has all three. Their blog is articles, they have podcasts, and they have a YouTube channel. Even if their channel might not be super active, I don't know, I didn't check it out. But the point is, they see the importance of it. So we as small business owners need to pay attention to how other businesses, especially the bigger ones, are marketing and showing you where they are putting their emphasis and attention on. That should tell you, maybe I should pay attention to nurturing these platforms. All right. So I want to have these closing thoughts. So in closing, instead of being frustrated by this move, we need to pay attention to the lessons, right? So I'm just kind of reading off of my notes. So excuse me if this is a bit repetitive. The fact is, the world is changing. We are not going back to normal, in air quotes, the way things were before. Everyone is making changes. Inflation is happening all over the world. Sure, smaller economies will have a harder time, but trust that not even the first world countries, not even the United States, and are being impacted as well. All right? It's not just your grocery bills. It's not just your utility bills and whatnot that has been affected, but it's also the apps that we use in our day-to-day. All right? Everything is being impacted. So I just want you all to think about that. It just means that as difficult as it can be sometimes, we just have to find ways to adapt, because sitting and complaining and being stressed out by things that we can't control isn't going to change the fact that we're going to have to adapt it somehow. And sure, it's human. We're going to vent. We're going to be like, oh my gosh, what do I do? But after you've allowed that human moment to pass, then now, spring in to, okay, how am I going to navigate through this? How am I going to make this work for me? And for me, in terms of making this work for me, was to get the lessons, was to share this podcast. It created a piece of content that now can be useful to someone else. All right? And just hint to my fellow small business owners, just don't be mad, right? Just don't be mad when your favorite service provider, your favorite coach, photographer, videographer, graphic designer, web designer, brand strategist, social media manager, consultant, agencies, event planners, virtual assistants, etc. raise their prices. They, more than any of these big brands, need to raise theirs as well. I read somewhere actually that in order to keep up with the inflation of 2021 and I guess going into 2022, there's a certain percentage that actually every service provider needs to raise their price by, just to balance things out. That's just to balance things out. Like whatever your price points were at the beginning of the year is actually just not gonna cut it. All right. So I just saying that on a side note. And it's not just about, prices and money, but it's also about the way we work, having boundaries and adjusting, because we all have families, whether we want to acknowledge that in the workplace or not. So we just have to take some time to revisit not just the pricing, but the tiers. Like today was a talk about the different tiers. It's about looking at the apps that you may no longer need to use. Those are the things that we need to think about. We need to clean house. And I don't mean clean house, but actually just comb through everything. I think if you can't do that right now as we move into a busy season, which is, the holiday season, January, right after Christmas Day, when things are a bit quiet, that's the time to take a moment, take a business day for yourself, and really go through and take inventory of what you need to use, what's a non-negotiable, what's not a non-negotiable, and that you could probably like consolidate. So I was actually talking to a colleague, and instead of using Zoom, she decided to consolidate that into just using the Google suite of products. She was like, "Hey, I already pay for Google Workspace, right? Or Google for Work, or whatever it's called, right? Can't remember right now. These companies are always changing up the names and rebranding it up a bit. Like, take a look at what you already pay for. Maybe you're paying for services twice because another service has maybe more of an all-in-one and it has more features. Like, go back and look at what you're paying for and see what your package comes with that maybe you could sacrifice using that other app that might have a nicer interface, but maybe you can sacrifice that in order to keep your price points fairly reasonable, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Definitely hit me up on Instagram. Let me know what you think about this. I love having conversations with you all in the DMs. I hope this was a helpful episode to you. And if it was, of course, if you made it this far, this was probably, nourishing and useful to you. So definitely share this episode with a business bestie, a colleague. Just share it. All right. Talk to you guys on the next episode.